January 2024, I was in Manila and I went to a small part of a global mission conference. It was a gathering of mission thinkers, mission theologians, mission practitioners, really from all over the world. And I went there to the conference because my longtime colleague, my good friend, Dr. June Escosar, was giving a keynote address. And I was doing it to encourage June. I was also going to meet certain mission thinkers from around the world, that just to say hello, to be there to encourage them. And I didn't expect to be moved by God the way I was. I had heard June preach on missions, I don't know, a dozen times. And when he got up to preach in front of hundreds of global mission leaders, I mean, really from all over the place, it was like the Holy Spirit spoke to me about the next part of my mission. And really I wanted to go up at the altar call and become a missionary all over again. And out of that, when that session that June preached, I went straight back to my office in Manila and started writing on the whiteboard. And people would walk by. We have floor-to-ceiling window glass in our offices in Manila, and anybody who walked by, I would call them in the office, in my office, and we would start brainstorming about global mission, about how we could reach every nation with the gospel, how we could plant a campus-reaching church in all of the remaining nations that we're not in yet. One by one. And so really for the next several hours, I had multiple people brainstorming with me. Eventually, June came back to the office and he became a part of that brainstorming. And all of that writing on the whiteboard, it really rolled out for about a week while I was in Manila. What came out of that is what we call Mission 2029. This was in early 2024. And as it started developing, it was a 5-year vision, 5-year strategy to put campus-reaching churches in 20 new nations by the year 2029. And now churches, every nation, churches all over the world are participating, praying, starting mission initiatives in multiple nations around the world. And today it's a privilege to have June Escosar right here in Nashville. He just preached at our weekly devotional, and wow, so many stories of gospel advance, church planting, campus ministry around the world. So today, June and I are going to talk about Mission 2029. June, glad to have you here. Welcome to Nashville. It's always encouraging to have you in the room with us as we're talking, as we're praying about global mission.
I'm excited to be here and just to share some updates about what God's doing.
June, give me you just went through around the world with our staff.
Yeah.
What are some of the highlights? I know we can't mention some of the nations.
Yeah.
You talked about one nation that was 100% Islam.
Yeah.
We won't say where it is or what it is. Talk about that.
Well, this one particular nation, it just, every time you go visit their website, it just publish it's 100% Muslims. But no longer, because just 5 months ago, we have our first ever local person that have gotten saved, and not only gotten saved, but baptized. And this person is growing in the Lord. And as of 2 months ago, 3 more actually local from this nation have also gave their life to Jesus, along with one other from another nation. And so this is pretty exciting. This is unprecedented. And now they're even planning to send 2 of them at the World Conference in March. But this, I believe, we're going to see a multiplication of this story again and again.
And June, I've been to that nation. Deborah and I were there a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few places I've been where I saw no sign of the church. I saw no, I didn't even see many mosques.
Yeah.
I know it's a Muslim nation, there were a few, but there was just no evidence of anything. So we're obviously underground there.
Yeah, it takes a lot of wisdom to meet together, but the engagement is very creative. They do it through sports. And that's where when it's downtime comes, that's where the gospel is being shared. They start by sharing their own stories. And the Holy Spirit always works, no matter how trained you are. And now we're beginning to see breakthroughs. But I think prayer also plays a key role as we continue to pray for this nation for many, many years.
June, you are well known for, in my mind, 3 phrases. And I want to talk about those 3 phrases. One is the title of your book, A Bible and a Passport. So talk to me about that. What does this mean? What is the what is the title of that? Where did that come from? What is that about?
Well, the very core of the title of that book really captures the very essence of our movement as every nation, that every single disciple, if they truly love God, they will have to have a Bible. And if they truly want to obey God, they need to obey the Great Commission, which is to go make disciples of all nations. That's really the heart of it.
Okay, so tell me about you getting a passport. When we met in 1984, you were I think a fresh college graduate.
Sure.
And I remember you coming to the meetings, and you were, we're talking now 40 plus years ago. You were a young, very skinny, small provincial student.
Yeah.
And when you heard this message about getting a passport in order to obey God, tell me about you getting a passport.
Well, let me backtrack just a little bit. In the early days when the Americans came and several other pastors from the United States start preaching the gospel, they'd always preach, one day God's going to use you Filipinos to go preach the gospel all over the world. In my mind, yeah, good preaching, but it's not going to happen. I mean, we're broke, we don't have the money, so it's just not. But, we have the audacity at least to say, well, if God says so, if he commands us to go in all the world, he probably needs to provide. So the first step, even just believing for a passport, is major. You think it's just processing a piece of paper just to get a document? I think that's an act of faith. And so when I got mine, I could not believe I finally had a passport. I just don't have the money, and whichever nation the Lord will send me is far beyond my expectation until the opportunity opened up. And true enough, my first ever trip was in Melbourne, Australia. And when I got there, not knowing anything, that there's a form, an arrival form to fill up and put your address, I don't have any of that. I have no knowledge of what it takes to even travel. That was my first. And what makes it worse is because my family name is always misunderstood. Instead of Escosar, which is my family name, it's read as Escobar. There was even a time when my passport itself was mistakenly named Escobar.
No, they had, the Philippine passport said Escobar.
Escobar, yes.
Wow.
I think my second or third passport is actually Escobar.
Now,
So,
of course, this is the early 80s, back
Yes.
when
Yeah.
a lot of people watching this are too young to remember, or maybe they weren't born yet. But Pablo Escobar
exactly.
was the narco-terrorist who the whole
Exactly.
world was looking for. And so, you were mistaken for him, a relative, I guess.
Exactly my concern, which is why everywhere I stop, they look suspicious. They kind of look, they kind of check me. They take more time probably than other people. But when I finally complained to the government, all they did was go to the third page and handwritten and said, notated to be read Escosar. So they didn't even change my passport, so I have to use this.
All right, so when we went to Australia,
Yeah.
you had Escobar on your passport.
Yes.
Okay, I remember we got in two different lines.
Yeah.
And I think it was Deborah and I and you. And we go straight through, and then I see the security escorting you over
Yeah.
to another room.
Yeah.
And there are glass windows, and I'm watching you in there getting interrogated. It was
Yeah.
pretty scary, pretty intimidating watching through the window and praying for you. I'm thinking, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah, they went through a lot, searched everything in my luggage, only to find out that it is Escosar, not Escobar. So they let me go.
So they assumed you were somehow related to the drug lord.
I guess so, yeah. So, and I got in trouble in so many other countries, not just in Australia, but in other countries as well. Even when I check in on airlines, sometimes it takes them a while, and all the rest are just passing through, and I'm embarrassed that I'm holding the line for some. Then I said, could you double check again, please? It should not be Escobar, it should be Escosar. Oh, okay. And that's it. They just let me go
Okay, so
through.
your uncle, your grandfather, Pablo Escobar, was on everybody's watch list all
Yeah.
over the world. Now,
Yeah.
is your passport corrected now?
It is corrected.
All right, so we talk about a Bible and a passport. You said something today. Another phrase that you're famous for now, since we started Mission 2029, is at least.
Yes.
Because our strategy is to establish campus-reaching churches in 20 new nations by 2029. So we're in 81 or 82 nations, and our goal is to have campus-reaching churches in 20 more. But every time you say it, you're unable to say that mission statement. You always add the phrase "at least."
Yeah.
And I know we argued about this early on when we were asking you, would you step out of the seminary? You've been the original president of Every Nation Seminary. You did a great job getting, a an idea, from an idea to reality, and we could talk about the seminary all day and appreciate what you did. But when we ask you, would you head up Mission 2029, your initial argument was the vision was too small. It was too easy.
Yeah.
It was enough. But talk about the at least. You always have to insert that at least.
Well, I guess because we're not a startup movement, our movement is healthy. Of course, we have a lot of growing up to do, but the regions are very healthy. And looking at our landscape, where we are, and it seems like through the years of sowing the vision for the nations, to honor all of our regional leaders, many of them have really taken ownership, that they captivated by it, and we probably just needed somebody to make sure all of these, as a catalyst to put these things together. So knowing the vast resources we have, and to think that we're only reaching 20 nations, so that's why you could see, I mean, I've never said this before, but I'll say it here. Right now, based on the engagement we have, this is only September, we have 53 countries expressed by every single country or local church or region or any kind of leader. 53 already. And many
already that are targets, or that where something is going on.
Something is going on in 53 nations. So I believe half of that work has already been started. There's either they're mobilizing teams, but the 25 is a lot more serious. So which is why, again, I don't want to preempt. This is not about numbers. This is not about just programs. This is about God's heart for the nations. He commanded us to go make disciples of all nations, to ask God for the nations, which is why I'm overly confident, not in my ability, not just in our resources, but just where we are. And of course, I believe it is a prompting of the Holy Spirit which inspires me. This is to me like a dream job.
And June, to be clear, when we talk about being in a nation, what we mean by that is with a campus-reaching church. And you were together with us at our Apostolic Council meeting, I think it was in Washington, D.C. the year before last. And we talked about what we mean by that is not that we have a person there or a contact. We actually have a church that has an ordained pastor. Maybe that's a missionary, maybe that's a local, but ordained meaning that they've been through Leadership 215 and they've been, at some level, had hands laid on them and set in. And it's not just that leaders there, but there's also a weekly gathering where the word is preached, where there's worship, and sometimes the worship in underground churches, there's no band, there's no drummer, it's very quiet, but at least where there's the sacraments, baptisms, preaching of the word with a leader that is really a leader. That's what we mean by church. But we have all these other nations you're mentioning where we have some people, but we don't have a leader, or we have other places where we have a missionary who's gone. Maybe they're studying the language, maybe they're still studying the culture, and they haven't actually started yet. So that's where you get the 50 plus nations.
Right. As I look at all where we are, what we have, I categorize, I observe at least like 7 different dynamics that could potentially lead to a church plant. So some are ready to go, some are just contacts, some are international students, some are a Macedonian call, some are diaspora movements of business people or families. So regardless of where they are, the goal is to be able to funnel them to become an outreach, so that they are now beginning to engage campus and community, and then eventually will become a church plant. So in the meantime, it doesn't matter if it is a businessman or an international student that God's used. So the advantage of having this team, Mission 2029, is to be able to guide all of these outreaches, this engagement, these contacts, to be able to funnel them to become established churches. That's the goal.
Okay, and when we leave here, you and I, in a couple of days, we're going to Costa Rica together for our Latin America Build Conference. And you were talking earlier in our devotional time about the church in Panama. All right, so it's a church that's been going for 2 years. And they're already sending teams to Guatemala. They're already sending teams to Costa Rica. They're already planting churches with a small church that's brand new. So the question is this, all right, how big does a church need to be before it considers global mission? How old must a church be? Because there's one famous, one of the larger, wealthiest churches in Manila. I won't mention the name. Love the church. They're great people. But in a wealthy area of the city, a church of around 10,000 with their own building. And that pastor used to say, when we get a little bit larger, we'll start doing global mission. For now, we're doing the Philippines.
Yeah.
And when that pastor would say that, I don't know if our budget was ever the size of their budget, or at the time our church was dwarfed by them.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of churches that have the mentality, a lot of pastors, one day I'll do global mission.
Yeah.
When I'm larger, when I have a big enough budget, when I don't know, when what. So what do you advise churches? How big do they need to be, and how old do they need to be to start global missions?
Let me say this. There are different levels of engagement. No matter how small or big you are, every church can participate in global missions. Assuming you're just even a startup, you could pray. I mean, they could partner by just engaging in prayer. And I think it's a good thing for their people to catch a global vision, because that's what the Great Commission is. One of the primary reasons the church exists is to become witnesses in their community, in the campuses, in the community, and of course the nations. But then as you begin to grow, maybe you reach about 70, about 80, you could even start church strengthening. You could send a team. You can participate. So your people at its infancy can now see the world, and they go back with greater burden, greater passion, greater heart for the lost, greater heart for the campuses, and to engage. But as soon as you get bigger, maybe 200 and beyond, you have to either initiate a church plant, or you can partner with another church to plant a church. I mean, when my church was 100 people, my goal is we will plant a church every year. I know that a health church is supposed to plant a church, one church every 2 years. Now that's just rule of thumbs in most church planting things. But you know, the bigger you are, you know, great resources, much is given, much is required. You have to step up. And if a pastor, his gifting is not in missions, he could raise catalysts. He could raise people that have a burden. I think it's good for churches to reach the nations. It's good for our churches, for our people to know that our church exists far beyond its as a local church, and it's literally impacting the nations of the world.
And June, you speaking of impacting the nations of the world, there's another phrase that I think you coined that has now gone all over the world. The idea of going from a mission field to a mission force.
Yes.
I first heard that from you, so I'm assuming that's a phrase you used, and so talk to us about that. The idea, what is the difference in being a mission field and being a mission force?
Now that thought is very crucial, because the default mode is if you're small, if you're tiny, you're on the receiving mode. And your mentality is like, from our side of the world, we call it a poverty mentality. Always a give me, bless me, help me, come. Now there are seasons in the church life where you needed that. But you could never break poverty if your mentality is always give me, help me, bless me. You know, in the early days, that's fine. It's like a small baby who can do anything. He cannot work, so you have to feed him, take care of him, you know, all of that stuff. Churches are like that. There are seasons. But at a certain point, as churches begins to grow, with what little they have, they need to start sowing. And you know, the least that some churches could do aside from praying is to give. Everybody can give. And if you cannot give big, start giving, because once you do that, you shift from being just a field to becoming a sowing nation.
And June, I remember in the early days of Victory, when we were probably 200 people, mostly students, mostly very poor students.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, we would do a monthly mission offerings. Part of it would go to a church that was even poorer than we were, to Jesus
true.
Flock. They did the ministry to the kids under the bridge, and we would give money every month to our friend Jerome because of what he did, the people he served. We also would give to missionaries when our church was we could barely pay the rent. I think your salary was probably 500 pesos, probably $10 a month, something like that. I don't remember. It wasn't much, but from the very beginning, we were praying for the nations, and we were giving what we could to missions.
Yeah. Well, the spiritual principle is that no matter how much money you give to the field never reaps. It's always the sower. So we thought, if Philippines is a field, no matter how much money is given to us, and we shout and thank God for the blessing, the real blessing is not just in the receiving, it's in the giving. As from Jesus' words in the book of Acts, it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. So we decided, if you remember that, Pastor Steve, we decided we are no longer just going to become a field. With what little we have, we are going to sow. So we took up our pledges about our tithes and our offerings, which we took up first Sunday of each month, which we still do. And when people start to give, and I remember, poverty was broken. I mean, the finance, including the general funds, it's not just the mission funds, but the general funds went along up, up, up. How do I know that? Because when I serve as missions director, we monitor that. And that we have become a mission force because we have decided to just no longer be just a mission field.
And I think the idea from the very beginning, as I've often been asked, people will see Victory 20 years, 30 years, 40 years now after, and they'll ask me, what did you do in the beginning that was foundational? And I don't know where I got this idea, but it was that we would be a self-supportive church.
True.
And in the early days, people would come on mission trips and they would see you and our other original staff members, you and Ferdy and Manny Moletta and others, and they couldn't believe what little salary you guys got, what you were living on. And they would try to sponsor pastors. And for some reason in the early days, I always said, no, we're not going to become dependent on outside funds. I watched so many missionaries start churches that were completely funded abroad and therefore governed abroad. And I somehow had the idea that you cannot be self-governing if you're not self-funded.
True.
And I still believe that. And it was a hard decision. Now, when people wanted to give us money from abroad, I would say, no, you cannot sponsor a pastor. We're going to learn how to live by faith. We're going to learn how to sacrifice. We're going to learn how to believe and trust God for financial breakthroughs. But you can give us a one-time gift. We need new speakers. These are old and they sound horrible. A couple of $1,000s, we could buy a new sound system. And so we would receive money like that, but I never allowed outside funding in terms of our general operating expenses. And even the land and buildings that we purchased and the buildings we built, we never asked for money outside. Occasionally people gave us money from outside, but we never asked. It was all done by Philippine peso. And I look back on that, and I hadn't at the time heard the phrase that you've often said, from a mission field to a mission force, and the field doesn't reap, the field just receives, and you have to sow. And so we did that principle from the beginning, and we always gave to missions, not just finances, but time and people, and often sending our best and having huge holes and gaps in our church as far as personnel, because they would go on mission and not come back. And so I look back on it, no regret. It was difficult at the time, but I look back and that shaped us. So what would you say to a pastor who's wrestling with becoming a mission force? What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, that all came from you. And we, in as much as we have our own needs, but we respected it.
Well, some of it didn't. You went in, you later on got a doctorate in missiology. So a lot of the missiological thinking, there were things that early on we stumbled into some good decisions, but I think your years of study sort of crystallized a lot of it and said, hey, that's what we did, and that's because we were clueless in the beginning, but I think when you went to seminary to get the missions degrees, I think that's when things started forming. So keep going.
I think as far as pastors are concerned, I think it is absolutely wise. Don't ever wait until you have the resources. With what little you have, you start to sow, because it is always the sower that reaps. Whether the sowing is finances, prayer, or sending a team, loaning a staff, sending a missionary, I tell you this, the return will be incredible for the church. And I've seen it happen again and again. And many of the nations, poor nations or every nation churches we have that have applied that same principle, I have seen breakthroughs. It is absolutely different. It's unrecognizable. So the more you perpetuate this, we have needs, we're not going to send, you're going to get stuck there for a really long time. But if right now you start making a step of faith and begin to sow, make a commitment to be a mission force rather than a mission field, I'll tell you, you'll see breakthroughs upon breakthroughs. And I can tell you stories upon stories of how our local church had been blessed supernaturally, provision, leaders like crazy, because we have made God's mission, we're becoming a mission force, a priority, and God has blessed us tremendously.
June, now there's one more phrase that you're famous. Anybody who knows you worked closely with you, they've heard you say this, all right? Let me explain it before, and I'll tell you the phrase, and I want you to respond to it. So you have been our music director in the early days. You're either on piano or on guitar, and the guitar was bigger than you were in those days. Down in the basement, I've got pictures of you leading worship. You've been a campus missionary, a church planter, a pastor, a missions director, an evangelist. Eventually, we asked you to be the seminary president, and you immediately told me, I'm not an academic. I have a doctorate, but I'm not an academic. I'm a practitioner. And I said, that's exactly what we want. We've got enough academics. We need a practitioner, a visionary, a missionary, a missiologist, etc. You've served in all these capacities. And as you know, it's very common in Victory that people change roles quite often. Very few people have been in the same position or the same place for any length of time. We're kind of ministry ADD kind of people that we move around a lot. And your response, every time we've asked you to do a new job, your response is always, I serve at the pleasure of this team.
Yes.
And there's a side joke on that. That means June doesn't want to do this, but he will. And that phrase, no matter what you didn't want to be the president of the seminary. When we asked you, you said, I'll serve at the pleasure of this team. And then you explained all the reasons you were the wrong one. The only job that you've ever done in my memory that you didn't say, I serve at the pleasure of this team, you went, yes, this is my dream job, is the director of Mission 2029. I think that's finally, after 41 years of working together, we finally found a job that you wanted to do. But explain what that means when you say, I serve at the pleasure of the team, because sometimes people have a vision and they run for it. And so, because honestly, I think you've laid down a lot. And a lot of things that you could do and wanted to do what the apostolic team, then now our Bishops' Council in the Philippines or our global apostolic team asked you to, I forgot also Leadership 215. You're the one who took that and ran with it and did it in record time, under budget, faster than we expected. And it was mind-boggling. I think you just wanted to get rid of that, get that done so you can move on to other things. But what do you mean when you say I serve at the pleasure of this team?
You know, ultimately, we serve the purpose of God. But as a kingdom person, when there is a need, even if it's outside your gifting, I'm willing to do it for the glory of Jesus Christ. I'm willing. I might need extra grace to do something, but you know, I wanted to serve. And when I say that I serve as a pleasure of the team, I see it from a kingdom perspective, that I'm not just serving man or a program, that I know the implication of what this will do. So that is what inspires me to do jobs that I may be not primarily gifted to do, like Leadership 215. I thought, man, there's a lot of academic people, but if no one's going to take this, I'll do it. I mean, if you gave it to me, I will give my whole heart. And because part of the wiring God's given me is being strategic and achiever, then I certainly leverage on that gift that God's given me. So I'd say whatever needed to be done. It could be a season, and I feel like the Lord's watching and seeing how faithful we are, even with things that we are passionate and not so passionate about. But if it needed to be done, just do it. So to me, as long as I'm in the game, as long as I'm there, doesn't matter about title, there is. So maybe God's giving me my dream job now after all these years being just faithful.
It seems like it, and I think you'll finish before 2029. If our goal is 20 new nations with a campus-reaching church, we'll have to figure out something else to do. But since you're adding the at least, then I guess it'll continue on. Now, June, when you pioneered what was then called Taft Church, and Taft is the second U-belt in Manila. There's the U-belt, and then there's the overflow U-belt with Taft, right in the center of all these universities. I don't know that we've ever planted a church in the Philippines that produced so many leaders. Church planters all over the Philippines, global missionaries who went all over, and the church was never very large when you were leading it, because I think most of the people were sent on mission and were borrowed from other congregations for leaders. But when you think about a church that multiplies leaders like that, what would you say to pastors? We both run into pastors who are building great churches, and they're really godly men and women. They are people of faith. They're faithful, and they're faithful to their church. But there's a leadership shortage, and we constantly have pastors of small churches, large churches, new churches, older churches, who are asking, "Can you send me a leader to do this or that?" But that never seemed to be a lack
Yeah.
when you were a pastor
Yeah.
for that season.
Yeah.
So what did you do that where not only did you not have leadership shortages, but you were giving leaders to the churches that did have a shortage?
Yeah. Well, for the record, this is a less than 1 year old church. I was very, very intentional. Everybody that goes to church, I look at them from the lens.
This is when the Taft Church started.
When the Taft Church started. I look at them from the lens of, what does God want to do with this person? What does God want to do with this person? So as leaders, never underestimate the incredible gift and grace God's given you to spot that in the lives of people. So I created platforms. I don't have full time, but I've identified people who could be in that role. So I invited them. They're all working professionals. So my staff meeting every week was 7 a.m. so that they could take off at 8 to get to their work at 9. And so
So you had a staff meeting at 7 a.m. with volunteers.
With all volunteers.
Okay. Yeah.
And believe it or not, these volunteers turn out to be some of the finest leaders we have in the movement. Every time I sit down there, I'm thinking of them as future pastors already, whether they turn out to be a pastor or not. But I trained them. I gave them the platform. In fact, in the church that I led for a year, because I served there for 3 years, there's never been a single time I was in charge of all that's happening there, but there's never even been a single time where I took up an offering or I led a meeting. I push people and I let them do all the work. I do the preaching until later on several other preachers came along, but I want to get them hands-on. I want to give them a feel of what it is like. So missions in our first year, believe it or not, Pastor Steve, my goal was to close down the summer for a month, everybody to go.
Okay, now, the whole church goes on mission in the summer.
Goes to mission.
Okay.
Now, of course, it's a little bit extreme, right?
A little bit.
My goal was to be 100 in the first year, but we full shot, we were 95. And I rallied the church, but I failed because instead of 95 going, only 65 were able to go to 5 nations.
You failed. I'm surprised we didn't fire you at that point.
I failed. Only 65 went in 5 nations, and 80% of them rode the plane for the first time ever. So which is why if the church excuse is we don't have resources, this is a 1-year-old church, a less than 1-year-old church, sending to 5 nations 65 people, and 80% rode the plane for the first time ever.
June, besides all the stuff you do at the seminary, with global missions, all the travel, you're also a Lolo.
Yes.
Grandfather.
Yes.
Do you recommend the grandfather gig to anyone?
Absolutely. It's the most incredible thing. I can already foresee this guy is going to be one of my prodigies. I'm going to raise him up to become a great evangelist. Whatever his career will be, he will be powerful in the Lord. My first gift when he was just a baby was a Bible. So it goes on record. My first gift is a Bible from my granddad. So.
June, that's powerful. First thing he ever got from you is a Bible.
Yes.
And I've seen videos of your grandson mimicking you preaching, the famous June Escosar arm chop, where he's mumbling some kind of words that nobody knows what he's saying, but yet his arm is, while you're preaching, he's in the back mimicking you.
He's fascinated. He's fascinated with me preaching. He'd just be glued watching me. And I did not know that after that he would mimic and he would go in the corner and start grabbing something as if he was preaching, pointing on the PowerPoint and started preaching like that. And it just brings so much joy to me that at less than 2 years or 2 years old, that a spiritual formation is happening. And I believe he will have a great future. Yeah.
June, thank you for all you do to serve in the Philippines, Asia, and the world. It really is a privilege and honor working with you now for 4 decades. I look forward for the next few decades. And as we close, I'm giving you the last word. What do you want to say? You can look at that camera. What do you want to say to the leaders around the world who are watching this? What word do you have for them?
Well, Romans 10 is very clear. How can the world hear without someone preaching to them? At the end of the day, the failure of the world to hear is the failure of the church to mobilize their people, to give, to pray, to send people to missions. I pray, no matter how small, how big you are, you could be involved and you can make an impact in the world. If you're small, start engaging in prayer, in giving. If you're large, start sending teams. Work with me, Mission 2029. Let's reach the nations together. God bless you.